Hi, and welcome to my talk on the commandment of honor thy mother and father. I apologize if I sound a bit weird in this recording, just because I'm slightly blocked up because of a sinus infection going on around sort of like the face area, but it's okay. I'm all right to talk at least. And I've devised this one with a question and answer. So coming up with various objections to the commandment and answering some of those objections with the best conceived answers that I could think up. So this is part of a series of discussions on the commandments, and I'll refer, as I normally do, to the notes, and then I can go on to talk about a discussion about those notes, and that will follow. Okay. So this is all about the commandment of honor your mother and father. So I'm sorry if my eyes seem a bit weird because it's the sinus thing affecting me. And so basically, the first objection to honoring your mother and father would be if you never had any parents, I suppose. Um, Yet, even if you were an orphan, it may be that some other people act like parents towards you, be they older siblings or friends, a teacher, a support worker, whoever it is. A parent isn't necessarily only someone biologically related. It doesn't have to be limited to who gave birth to you, or a blood relative even, but whoever nurtures you, who supports you in a productive way, who disciplines you. So it's really who parents you. And I think it comes down to questioning what is a parent, first of all. And of course, there probably will be some people, but I would think it's quite limited, who've never had anybody act in any parental way at all. In which case, of course, you can't honour anyone and you probably haven't learnt to. And I think that's an important actual thing to remember, that there are some people that are brought up in really rough circumstances, perhaps on the streets or in a very violent situation or in an institution, that may not have been given that love or nurturing and discipline and that attention that's required to bring up a child in a productive way, where they're healthy spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, and all the ways. And so there may be some people that aren't able to honour because they haven't been parented. So it may be that, and much more likely is that there's people that can only honour or in a limited capacity because they've only been limited parentally. The two are linked. Your capacity to give honour, of course, is linked to how well you've been parented or how much. It's probably a whole spectrum, I imagine, with people that have had totally no parenting or abusive parenting, and people that have had, completely the best parenting and the full support and nurturing and encouragement and everything. And most people, it's probably somewhere along that sort of spectrum, I would imagine. So it probably varies hugely, the capacity of how able you are to give honour and how much parenting and support that you've received. That brings us on nicely to what if you have had abusive parents? Of course, there's different types of abuse that range in severity, ranging from very mild right up to the most severe. But all the more reason to be honourable to them. But we need to consider, what does it mean to give honour to someone? What is honour? Something that if you look up in the dictionary, you'll find one definition. But I think it's something you have to seek for yourself. You have to find, not just in a simple sentence, but what is it in terms of action? What does it look like in terms of your relationships, in terms of how you treat others in the world? The word historically is linked to honesty. If you look at it, it's etymologically linked. And it is about that, living a truthful life rather than a deceptive one. But we also have to be cautious in how we give the truth to others. It should be done correctly, in a calm manner as possible, but also sensitive to the needs of the parent, yourself, and the wider family. I know this is a serious issue about parental abuse, and someone who is severely abusive is not acting anything like a parent, in fact. So, unless they can make serious changes, one cannot actually view them as parental. For example, if someone carries out a serious abuse, like a rape, molestation, purposefully and unnecessarily denying to an extreme level their material, social, and emotional needs, and doing this regularly, this then should be reported to others who can help prevent this from happening, to an appropriate authority figure that does have concern for the welfare of the child. In some cases, reporting the parent to the appropriate authority may be the only option, be it the wider family, a teacher, the police. It may be, however, more appropriate for mild forms of abuse to confront the parent in a reasonable manner, explaining how what they are doing is affecting you, being as honest as possible. It depends, like what the situation. Obviously, you have to decide what you feel is right, and it would be an overreaction, for example, to call the police if a parent had just lost their temper and shouted once or twice, even if it was wrongfully done. On the other hand, it would be a total underreaction to simply attempt to be honest and have a face to face or discussion through a letter if it was about a serious abuse, which merits some sort of intervention, especially if the child is young, and requires others to listen to both sides. And that's where mediation is so essential. It's important to decide what is an appropriate response to parental abuse. This, of course, is something we learn as we get older. An adult is more competent at deciding than a teenager, who in turn is more competent than a child would be. It's important to note all parents do commit mild forms of abusive behaviour. Since we all, as humans, commit abuses, even if it's only mild, none of us are perfect. So it's important to try and be forgiving and understanding of our parents, who are bound to make mistakes, just as we will in our capacity to care for others also. It is important for all of us, therefore, to learn to be forgiving, but to be honest as possible. If something greatly upsets us, we have to try and be honest about it, and that can be hard. It's helpful to us in any conflict resolution process to try and listen to the other side, asking relevant questions. Why are they acting this way? To try and understand it from the perspective of the other person. And what can be done to help better support them, to prevent them from doing this in the future? Is there something that can be done better and that could be learned perhaps from understanding their position clearer? There will be times that you might think something is abusive, but it turns out not to be, but perhaps just to be a discipline that you've resented, or have a good reason for it. Thus, it's important to ask lots, find out the context. For example, a young child may be upset if the parent shouts at them when they are about to absent-mindedly cross a road. But if they didn't do this, it would certainly be a neglectful action on the parent's part. Or an older child might think it's wrong they have to go to bed earlier than a sibling, or can't go out to a disco. So it's vital to ask why they acted in the way that's upset you. Is there a good reason behind what they're asking you to do? In terms of maintaining a relationship with a seriously abusive parent, one must be very cautious, considering your own well-being as well, but also the well-being of the parent and potentially others too. It's necessary in cases of very serious allegations of abuse for others to be involved also, to mediate. Obviously, any future abuses must also be prevented to you and also to others. Hence why it's also important to report serious concerns to others. Oddly, preventing them from carrying out future abuses is honouring them, since in the long run, this would only be better for them. It would be worse for them not to be faced with the reality of the consequences of what they're doing and to be continued to get away with it without realising perhaps how much it's hurting someone. Without being confronted, they would amass more victims, and that would be actually more bad karma in the long run for them. So, in fact, honouring them would actually be being honest at the right time and the right place there. So it's important to report the most serious of concerns because it's not just in your own self-interest, but theirs, but also, of course, about preventing other people from coming to harm. And of course, encouraging them to seek genuine repentance is what's in their best interest and in our own, of course. Even if we don't always see it that way, and we don't, of course. None of us do when we're confronted with something that we've done for a long time, we've felt is right, or we've defended for a long time. We don't like to be challenged on things like that. You know, that's just how we all are, and that's... But we have to consider and ask ourselves, is it causing other people harm? Is it going to cause me harm, therefore, in the long run? It's vital to be honest with God, with our fellow humans, but also with ourselves. You know, we need to be honest with ourselves at the end of the day. Not just to parental figures, because honesty is the foundation of good relationships. And it's these various relationships that bind society together or equally can tear it apart. You know, there's good and there's bad relationships within society. You know, society is a complex set of arrangements of a whole multitude of different relationships entangled that we have. And the parent-child relationship, you know, going back to the dawn of time, is an ancient and sacred one, you know, and people have experienced a whole spectrum of different things on that, you know, ranging from the most loving, self-sacrificing relationships right up to the opposite of people that have been denied their maternal love. And, you know, if you look at studies by psychologists like Bowlby, for example, you know, he states that, you know, maternal deprivation is a huge cause of psychological problems in loads of children, according to his studies. And there's loads of other psychological studies that back that up. That basically young children that are denied maternal love and nurturing at an early age are at a disadvantage and do struggle emotionally and in various ways throughout their life. You know, it sets in motion a developmental delay. I'm not saying that can't be made up for later, but for a young child, going back to the abuse, a young child will not know what is abuse and what's not. Their knowledge will be very limited. So it's important for all adults to intervene if they suspect any serious abuse on behalf of the child. It's true about people with dementia as well, isn't it, really, who we should treat like children. Yeah, it's true of animals as well, actually, who haven't got a voice. They can't speak up for themselves. So it's down to everybody else that has got one to speak up for them, because at the end of the day, we were all children once. We could all become ill. We could all lose our voice. We could all develop dementia. You know, it could happen to any of us. And like with animals and people with severe dementia, they're not able to know what is abuse and they're not able to report it. Some young children are even groomed to think that paedophilia is normal. Yet, of course, we as mature adults should all know otherwise. We know that it's completely wrong to have a relationship with someone who's totally physically and psychologically at a different end of the spectrum and not developed and not on the level with you. If we suspect serious abuse, we must take action, deciding what is the most appropriate thing on behalf of the child. And if we fail to do that when we know there's something wrong, we are negligent and it's blood on our shoulders. You know, we will answer for that one day. And we've got to live with that on our conscience. So it's in the interest of us, but also the child, to intervene if and when we suspect serious abuses. Even an older child who may know it's an abuse, though, may not know what to do about it. They may struggle to find an appropriate response, so they will often require support, be it material in terms of a refuge or even emotional support like counselling. Of course, we as adults are not all knowing, so there will be occasions when we also aren't always sure if something is abusive or not. It could be that someone has a serious mental illness, and the manner that they're treating us appears as quite abusive, or neglectful, or both. But we don't really know whether they're capable of acting any different, or whether the circumstances have pushed them to that. Sometimes we might know, but other times it might be that we're not sure, we're agnostic, whether they're capable of actually acting in a reasonable manner and of behaving caring and thinking for someone, or whether they're just so totally overwhelmed by the circumstances and are not capable of being caring. Or so it may be that we're not sure someone's capacity, or we're not sure about many situations. And sometimes, if we are uncertain, then we've got to go with the benefit of the doubt, I think, on that. And, it's difficult to know, because you can get played with that as well, of course. Some people can emotionally blackmail you and take advantage of you of that. But if you make the wrong call on that equally, then, you think somebody's taking advantage of you when actually they really are like that and they can't really help it, perhaps. So we're going to be faced with lots of challenges and difficult situations. We might not be able to diagnose correctly. We might make lots of mistakes, and they have repercussions for others as well as ourselves. We can be uncertain if a parent is putting us down to undermine us or giving us fair criticism, so we can learn from our mistakes. Yeah, sometimes that happens with lots of children. Even when you're an adult child, you're not sure, like if the parent is putting you down because they're constantly criticizing you, or if that's because they really want the best for you and they're just trying to push you as far as they can. I suppose it depends on that person's temperament, and you'd hope you'd get to know them well enough to decide that. And but it would be best, if we're uncertain, to take time to try and get some perspective on it. If a situation like that is really causing us a lot of concern, then we've got to take a step back, look at it as fairly as we can, try and get some perspective, take some meditation on it, take some time to think about it, discuss it with other people. Lots of people find prayer helpful, talking to others that will lend a sympathetic ear, or even researching it in the library, going online, going on blogs, doing whatever works for you. Often it takes great patience to deal with long-term issues, and love is long suffering, as it says, and it's full of its sort of ambiguities and difficulties and mistakes and forgiving and frustrations. And it's also, of course, as well as long suffering, it's also full of joy at other times and worth the struggle. And it's worth the hard work, but love is about hard work as well. It is something that you struggle with, and everyone struggles with. And I think that's a normal thing, in any relationship, but especially in a parent-child relationship also. So the next objection I've got to, there's a lot more to say on in terms of abuse, but I think that covers for me the major points. But I think there's also that sort of spawns lots of other minor issues, but there's probably, I imagine, a lot of other big issues I might have missed, I imagine. And I'd be really interested to hear what other people have to say about it, actually. I just think it's a really fascinating issue that actually I feel like we'd all benefit from having a larger discussion on, really. So the next objection I've got is, do I need parents because I'm an adult? And I would say all responsible authority figures, whoever they are acting to us parentally. So we all have many parents in a broader sense of the definition. Obviously, when you're a young child, your world is small. Yeah, especially in a nuclear family, you're limited the contacts with how many people you see. So the parents have a much larger influence on you. They are your authority figures, for better or worse. But when you become older, you have teachers that become more important, managers at work, landlords, friends, stepfathers, neighbours, people in various groups or clubs that you join. So other people take on a more important authority in your life. And of course, there's doctors as well, that you would seek attention in terms of medical authority, or the police, or and you might be called to court, to magistrates. So there's various authority figures for better or worse in your life, that you're bound to come into contact with more as you get older. So in a broader sense, we all can act parentally to others. We don't have to be in those professional capacities. I worked 18 months as a home carer, so I was kind of acting parentally in that role. I suppose, when I was sort of visiting people and sort of helping them, in their day-to-day activities at home, just with sort of various cooking and cleaning and talking and sort of helping washing and that. And I suppose there's sort of parental things you might do for a young child. And we all do things like that, actually. When we're assisting somebody in an area of expertise that perhaps we're trained in and they're not, we're acting then like a parent. And we are all children in some things, because no one can be an expert in all subjects. There's just such a vast number of different subjects that it's just inconceivable that you could be an expert in everything. You can know a lot about a little, or a little about a lot, but you can't know a lot about everything. So we depend on each other to be authorities in different subjects and different areas. In fact, anyone might find themselves forced to act as a parent. Forced to act as a parent, even if you say you don't want to be. You might be going down the street and you find a lost child or something, or you witness an assault taking place, somebody being beaten up or mugged or something. So, and you're put in a dilemma, you see someone at risk or in harm, and there can be many occasions when we could be called to act, and to act paternally towards others. It could be in an official capacity, in a professional sense, but it could just be in a more sort of casual thing that we just happen to come across the situation and we're called to participate at that time. So it could be in a capacity as a minister, a police officer, a doctor, a home carer, we've talked about. But it could just be as a friend to someone who's upset. It could be to a stranger who you come across and who needs help. So growing up is about learning to parent other people, to be parental to other people, but also about being parented too. It's both things. This is necessary because none of us are all-knowing. People have their various fields of expertise. A lawyer can give you good legal advice, and a doctor good medical advice. But a lawyer doesn't try and heal himself when he's seriously ill. And a doctor doesn't represent himself in a court of law when he's charged with serious misconduct. In short, there are times when we need to help others. So honouring parents changes as we get older. It's not just limited to our biological parents, but in a wider societal frame. And that requires us becoming more parental. You get people that say they haven't been parents biologically, they haven't given birth, or they haven't conceived, they haven't had their own parents, their own children. But in fact, they may not have in that capacity, but they still certainly will be expected to help others, and they will be confronted with many situations where they will have to act in a certain parental capacity. So we all need to learn about this. Honouring parents changes as we get older. Both our understanding of honouring and what is a parent evolves. Our understanding of honouring and also what is a parent that evolves for us. If a parent is one who cares for you responsibly, then we may have many parents, in fact, since there can be many people that care for you over your lifetime. Of course, just as a child struggles with the authority of their parents, whether it be good and responsible, or bad and abusive and or neglectful, we too, as adults, have our struggles, both to become better parental and authority figures for others, but also to learn what it means to be honourable and to how to honour authority. Honouring parents does not mean blindly following their every commandment. Obedience to responsible parents and responsible authority in general is, of course, a good thing and necessary, completely necessary for life to work and function and for a good, harmonious society to be bound together. Like Confucius would say, that is the essence of what keeps society, functional together. It thrives on good, productive, trusting, honouring relationships, right? Whether that's the doctor-patient relationship, whether that's in terms of government and citizens, whether that's teachers and students, whether that's employers and employees, whether that's preachers and their congregation, all different relationships built and invested on trust, whether that's in terms of judges and lawyers and their clients, and that all relationships are founded and based on trust. But of course we know, there are good and bad relationships in life, so that's where we find the struggle, of course. And none of us are perfect, of course we're not, and even well-intentioned parents will make honest mistakes sometimes. And they would appreciate being told at the right time and place. Yeah. The drunk parent who orders their child to turn up the music at 3 a.m. in the morning on a school day should certainly not be obeyed, unless it's me having a party. But no, jokes aside, they absolutely should not be. And obviously, it's hard to say no to a parent who should be acting responsibly to you. Or it could be, a parent who's sort of like cajoling you into going out and fighting someone that they don't like. This could be something just because they're driven by petty vengeance or something. And so there could be all manner of reasons why you might have to stand up to a parent and say, no, actually, you're wrong there, and I'm not doing that. And a good teacher doesn't want a student who blindly accepts everything he says, as if he's an absolute monarch beyond any questioning. He welcomes appropriate questions at the appropriate times, knowing that truth, the real truth, can withstand any questioning, and that the process of questioning itself, if fair, will remove any falsehoods, or at least some of them, hopefully. So in terms of exposing the lie or wrong information, it's a good process. He would welcome the questioning, rather than carrying on believing something in ignorance. We still must be cautious how we address a parent, however, speaking to them respectfully, not as some mate down the pub we muck about with. We can be on friendly terms with a parent sometimes, yet we must recognise that they have some superior knowledge in something that requires us to behave humble and addressing them politely, especially when it is necessary to discuss a serious issue. You don't turn up to court in your old rags and just say, all right, mate, to the judge. You address your grandparents or whatever the authority figure in the appropriate way, showing respect. You know, it could be different if they've done something towards you to humiliate you, or if they haven't behaved as that authority figure. You know, that might be a different situation. Honouring parents or responsible authority and really taking the time to think about their advice is not only sensible emotionally, but logically. As the old proverb states, don't bite the hand that feeds you, or you could easily go hungry. Appreciate the hard work and effort that it takes to actually nurture and sustain someone, and to actually do a good job as a parent. It is hard work. It's rewarding in the long term, but it's hard work, it's dedication, and anyone that's actually made an effort to be a parent knows that. It's hard graft. You know, you don't get a lot of time to yourself. It's self-sacrificing. You are putting in a huge amount of energy, of devotion, you know, and you know, you're dealing with a lot of shit. You're dealing with a lot of sick. You're dealing with a lot of screaming. You're dealing with a lot of all sorts over the years, and it's hard, and there's bound to be a lot of hardships with it, but I'm sure there's good things to it too, and we should appreciate, you know, the hard work and effort that goes into that, and we should try and learn to be thankful. And we all will be presented with dilemmas in our lives on how we must deal with abusive or responsible parental figures. So this, as a commandment, is not only an issue for young children, but for us all. It's important to be patient with parents, as they also must be, and that knowing none of us are perfect, we all commit mild acts of abuse. But we have the duty to help each other overcome. If one ever feels disheartened in the failures of parenting, we must also remember we all have our struggles to act more responsible and to parent others better. Ultimately, there is no perfect authority figure. Either God is the perfect authority figure if you believe in God. If you don't, then nobody is, unless you know a perfect person that never did anything wrong in all the minutes, the hours, the days, the weeks, the months, the years, the decades, the lifetimes, perhaps. You know, I don't know anyone like that. So, and whether you believe in God or not, it's still important not to treat others as God, as if they were all knowing or all powerful or all loving. Not because God is insecure like a man who will get offended easily, but because it leads to us. It leads to us to giving